Welcome to the Growth Cartel podcast, where real operators share their stories and form genuine connections. Dive into a world of unique narratives, practical insights, and strategies from the entrepreneurial front lines with authentic stories of the highs and lows of success and failure with our guests. Join Dickie, Reese and Gretchen Scott, co-founder of Kaleida and director of Women Who Code. This episode is brought to you by Petona and 4Phase Consulting.
Welcome back to the Growth Cartel. It's been a few weeks since we've been on, but we're really excited to have a very, very special guest with us today in Gretchen Scott. How are you, Gretchen?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're all in various locations. I'm actually in Sydney, and we've got Dickie back. Now, Dickie has had a little bit of a sabbatical, but as Dickie does, he's certainly not been quiet. He has changed jobs, started a new community, had a holiday to Sri Lanka, and moved cities. Welcome back, Dickie.
Thanks, Reese. It's just a casual month for me, you know.
Yeah, I've been exhausted watching you on LinkedIn.
Look, I'm exhausted as well, but you know, at least I can pretend that I'm not on the internet.
It's great to have you back. We've given Brandon the episode off, as we do. We'll rotate through so we don't have too many hosts because we didn't want to intimidate Gretchen. Joke. That's funny.
Not
Impossible to do that. That's impossible, I feel.
Yeah. We'll jump straight in, Gretchen. I mean, we've known each other for a number of years now through the startup ecosystem, Stone and Chalk, I think it was, talking about you making a skirt with Christmas lights on it, something along those lines.
That hasn't been finished yet. It got some projects. So crepe turned into a ball gown. Now I've right-sized it back to a skirt. And it's actually fibre optic cable, and it changes colour depending on how fast you move. So it's really cool, but it's still in production.
Yeah, and I've been really excited to get you on. Dickie and I have known you for a while to see what you're doing. Obviously, I know your co-founder quite well in Michelle, having worked with her within Cogsflow on the co-founder level for a while. So I loved what you guys were going off to do and the passion and the vision behind it. So maybe we just start off with just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and just a little bit about your career journey and where you are now and what you're passionate about, particularly around Kaleida and tech leading ladies and tech diversity and all those wonderful initiatives you've been involved in.
So probably off the back of that, you will have picked up, I'm so deeply passionate about having underrepresented people in the technology industry. And part of that's because technology is the infrastructure of our world at the moment. You can't go a day without bumping into it. And at the moment, it's built by quite a small homogenous subset of the community. So we started Kaleida to build high-performing and diverse technical teams, and we've got a marketing human that says they should represent the kaleidoscope of society. I like a little pun. But before that, in my life, I got told to sum up my career the other day, and someone goes, when I'd done it, they went, tractors, tits, and tech. I was like, oh, yeah, that is my career, friends. 3 T's. 3 T's. So my background actually is in maths. I studied optimization modeling and seriously geeky stuff at uni. And then I ran off and looked after the Southern Hemisphere's largest agricultural trade show for a few years. So that's where the tractors come from. Do you know they race tractors at these events? There's actually a thing where they spend a fortune on tractors. They put different weights behind them and race them. Who knew?
So I had some for the prep, I think, and for my early childcare, my dad used to drive on a tractor because we only had one car and mum used to take me to work. So I grew up in agriculture, just about 40 minutes outside of Mildura. So very familiar with tractors.
There you go. So we can both tick off tractors. That's a nice alignment. Have you got any tractors in your life?
I've got a Lego tractor from Tractor Ventures. I haven't built it yet, but that was like one of the highlights of my career, getting given the Lego tractor. So that counts, right?
I want one of them too. Matt, April, send me a tractor, please. And then I moved on to tits, as you do, right? So, Dickie, your face said a lot of things then, but no words came out. I was at a startup where we sold plastic surgery. And if you know me, that's kind of a weird thing. You'll be like, that doesn't really land with how you are as a human. But there's a huge piece around the difference between plastic surgeons and cosmetic surgeons in Australia. It's kind of 7 or 8 years worth of training, right? So we ran a whole education piece around what that was, and also had a collective group of the top plastic surgeons coming together because really good surgeons are not great at selling themselves or being made public, and it's not their job, right? So there was a piece we did there, and that was a seriously interesting startup. I had a great time. But once we'd done selling boobs to the world, I moved back into technology a bit more, and was at a start. Well, I taught web development for about 5 or 6 years, which was super cool. Love seeing people change careers and come into technology. And then I joined a startup, and we built a front-end delivery platform. Hyper geeky, seriously cool. And we got bought out by Cloudflare. And off the end of that, I went, what am I going to do with my life now? And decided that I wanted to do the startup thing again. My mum does say I should just go to therapy a bit more and sort that out. But we started Kaleida, and one of the reasons behind it was to help underrepresented people, particularly women, stay in the industry, because in Australia they drop out of tech at double the rate of men. So great programs like Code Like a Girl, Girls in Tech, so many getting women into technology, and then they're still leaving at double the rate. So we're wanting to help fix that piece. But at the same time, Kaleida is just a great product to make technical teams high performing. That was a lot of words.
I love it, Gretch. I mean, obviously the first thing, amazing. As someone that has jumped through different careers and different industries, I'm, also a generalist, but also know the value in being a generalist, right? I think it's amazing that having that diversity of experience. So congrats on that. Where you are now, what is the silver bullet answer to solving the problem with women dropping out of tech? I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on. I'm sure it's a variable of things, but what things could we improve on?
There's a few things that tie into it, but there's 4 main reasons women give for leaving. And I have to say, I'm talking just about women because we don't track data on any other groups or any cross-sectional stuff. So this applies for anyone who's not middle-class white dude in Australia. Oh, sorry, guys.
Guilty.
But what happens is the 4 main reasons. Number 1 was lack of flexibility, right? So if you tie in caregiving responsibilities or other social responsibilities, being in the office in the city all the time is really challenging. COVID screwed a lot of things up, but it kind of accidentally fixed that one. So you can kind of tick that off. Other than organizations who are pushing for back in the office 5 days a week, which is a bit silly in my opinion. But the other 3 reasons that were given are seriously fixable. One is unequal pay. And I know there's laws about it and all the things, but actually it still happens. I was talking to someone from one of our communities the other day, and she's a mid-level engineer, very, very competent, ready to be a senior engineer. And she was on $1,200 more a year than a junior guy who got hired about 2 weeks after her.
Wow.
And what was her deliverables and responsibilities were exponentially more. She should have easily been on 15, 20K more than him. So the pay thing is still an issue. In Australia, women with computer science degrees on average start with 18% less on day 0. So if then all your other jobs are kind of indexed off that, or when someone says, what pay are you after? You're just behind the 8 ball the whole time. So paying people the same thing, that's an easy start.
And how much of that is, sorry to jump in at number 2, but how much of that is systemic in bias around, pay structures, and how much of that is, this concept of women asking for less, or this kind of imposter syndrome that comes in? Like, how much would you balance across those 2 things?
I love that question so very much, because I read this awesome piece of research from one of the big 4. It was in the Harvard Business Review, came out in 2016. Women at the moment ask for pay rises at the same rate as men.
Okay.
They just get given it less. Yes.
So this is this whole concept's just
It's kind of a victim blaming piece.
Social construct to kind of justify why women get paid less.
Yeah. So they do ask, and they ask well. They're just not given it. And then there's some interesting pieces around they kind of get penalised for acting out of a gender norm as well. So then there's a pushback later. I do think, though, it's hard for organisations. Let's say I turn up and I go, hey, Reese, I want another 20 grand, right? We all know I'm awesome. Give me another 20 grand. You might be like, yeah, cool, but I feel kind of warmer towards Dickie because we're closer friends, right? So, and I've got 25K, so I'm going to give Dickie 20 and you 5. And that's how we behave as humans, right? Like I would do the same thing. So if you're going in to ask for these pay rises, you have to be able to put a business case forward as well at the same time. So I think there is, I've just said it's not the women's fault, and I don't think it is, but there is an onus to drive this yourself and to come in with data points. You can't just, hey, I want the money.
Yeah.
That's not going to land. So to your point, systemic is a huge piece of this, hugely huge. And it's expensive to fix. Like, I get it. If you've got an organization with all these people in it and you look and go, oh, I need to rebalance this, but it's going to cost me $5 million. And at the moment, money's tough, right? But there has to be a game plan to fix it, because that case I talked about with the woman who was paid less, she did all the right things. She asked her manager to back her up. They kind of went, yeah, cool, but I'm leaving next week, so that's not going to happen. She went to HR and they went, we told you not to discuss pay and you signed the contract, so that's on you. So she did the only reasonable thing and said, okay, thanks, and went and looked for other employment and got another job paying her what she was worth. But the interesting piece is that original organization, they pay a $10K kickback fee to anyone who refers someone who gets employed. So they could have given her $10K. And
Wild.
yeah, it's like, oh, that cost you a lot.
Well, I think sometimes it's the failure of senior leaders or leaders in those organisations to understand the long-term impact of what they're doing. So, I mean, I love the phrase "choose your hand." So it is hard to sit there and readjust all your pay scales to be more equitable, but it's also really, really hard to have a huge talent drain and a huge diversity drain, and that, you know, that cognitive drain on your organisation when all these people leave and go where they're valued. So. It's about not understanding what metrics really drive your organisation and looking at these short-term metrics versus long-term. They're both important, but what I see regularly is just it's very, very short-term. And I think that the loss of talent and the loss of diversity in opinion and voice and all those things, which are the flow-on effect of this challenge that we've all got within the industry, is really, really impactful. And the organisations with the leaders that get this are the ones that are excelling, in my opinion.
I agree. Have you read The Good Ancestor?
No.
Cool book. So it goes through politics and business and social good, but it talks about if you were a good ancestor, you would put more weight on long-term paybacks. It's a good read. Have it. It covers all parts of society, but it's a nice one. Recommend that.
Awesome. Love a
But
recommendation.
yeah, and I do agree with your point that it's sometimes it's the way we're hardwired to behave. Like if I'm spend more time socially with someone at work, I've got to make sure that I don't have that cognitive bias toward them if there's an opportunity where I'm involved in a recruitment process, which is really hard. It is hard to do. So I'm not saying it's not.
I was reading some really cool data, and it was around most of what you do in an organization as you move into leadership is make decisions, right? And that's pretty much you from day 2 at your job, because you have a leadership role regardless of how junior you are, I believe, at some level. And so what we do every day is make decisions. And there's a lot of data that's been around forever that says one person making a decision is a poorer choice than a group of people. And it kind of extrapolates out. So if you can get a decent sized group together making decisions and considering things, you get better outcomes. But that's only true if it becomes a diverse group of people. There is a cost of being a diverse group of people and that you slow down.
Yeah.
Because and there's a norming storming phase of the group. But then this piece of research was really interesting, and it said, actually, if you have a diverse group, it can slow you down by something like 65%. Like, I read it and I was like, oh, we can't say that. We can't say that out loud. That's terrible. No one's going to want diverse groups. This is... But then they followed on with the research and said, unless you have an inclusive, diverse group, in which case they become faster than kind of like a group of 2 homogenous people. And I was like, so the inclusion piece is a real key to this, right? So I could hire Dickie in my team. My team's heavily women. But if Dickie doesn't feel like he belongs there and can speak up and can be part of it, and if I don't listen to Dickie, then I've just slowed us down and made even worse decisions, right?
Yeah, so that's I guess that's the marriage then between diversity and inclusion.
You can measure diversity. You go, 1 woman, 2 men on the call. But how do you measure inclusion?
Good question. How do you?
How
would you measure it? I mean, I work in community, right? So I have the same problem.
I think there's a whole piece around part of what Kaleida does when we have people on board is track a sense of belonging. I think that's a really good metric. But there's other, like community-wise, you can tell if someone feels included because they'll participate more or turn up and share. But in saying that, there are some personality types who are, I know I'm on some Slack groups and pretty much I'm just a weird stalker who hangs out on the side. And that's I'm a bit of a lurker, but if
We
something...
call them lurkers. Yeah, I was about to say, there's a term for it in the industry. It's lurkers. We're all lurkers in some groups. Like, you can't be active in everything.
But it doesn't mean I don't feel included either, so it is hard to measure.
That's the quandary, right? And sorry, Gretchen, I interrupted you when you were going through 4 points, I think. What do you want to continue?
Oh, yeah, so we've done two. We've done flexibility, we've done unequal pay. The other two are really closely intertwined, and they're really friggin' jarring. So on average, women get promoted 2 to 3 years slower than men. So that sucks. You have to prove yourself time and time again into a higher level. And there's a really cool book, another book recommendation, I read a lot. It's called Why Are So Many Incompetent Men Leaders? And good job, a good title.
Great title.
But it's written by Thomas Chimero Premuzic. Sorry, butchered the name there. He's written a Harvard Business Review 1-page piece, but there's a whole book around it. And he talks about how there's so much in it. But in terms of the gender piece, he talks to women are held to higher standards. So often if you're promoted 2 to 3 years later, your skills are actually high because you've honed them further. And it holds all the way through. It's not just a tech thing, actually. It happens a lot in leadership. And so the thing I'm taking from the book and sharing with the world, at the end he goes, why don't we just hold men to the same standards as women? So they have to do 2 to 3 years longer in those roles so they get better and better and better and learn these new things. So that's a hot take on that one. But it's really closely intertwined with perceived incompetence. And so I hate this, and I almost left the tech industry based on it. So whilst my background's maths, it still landed pretty much in tech because it was optimization, modeling and writing code and doing all that really geeky, no one wants you at a dinner party kind of stuff. What is exhausting is that every time for a long time in my career, when I was in a room and I had an opinion or knowledge or experience around these things, I had to backtrack and go, hey, I've got this thing I want to share with you. And I'm qualified to share this thing because I've got a degree and because I worked in it for 4 years and because I did this project and because Dave said I'm good. And so if you have to preface every time you're sharing knowledge with a backstory that takes 5 seconds, you get to your actual story and you're like, oh, I'm tired, I forgot. And it just chips away. It's just exhausting and you end up fatigued and you go, I'm out. I'm done. I'm so tired of justifying my existence.
So that's cognitive bias, right? Across how, beyond the obvious, which is just time, how do we accelerate that quickly, so that we get rid of that? Because that's my assumption is for the most part, most people don't come from a position of malice when that happens. That just exists because of years of generational evolution, right? So how do you actually solve that? How do you accelerate that?
I think there's a piece around the more different looking, shaped, coloured people we get into leadership roles, the more it will balance out. Because
there's less cognitive bias that exists in decision-making positions.
Or my cognitive bias will be slightly different to yours.
Yeah.
We'll just put different biases in.
But I think, the frustrating thing I think that a lot of people would see as frustrating is it's going to be an evolution, not a revolution, because there's a whole generation, and this isn't a criticism, but there've been, there's a whole older generation who's sitting above us effectively that they were brought up in a different environment, and it's really hard to rewire them as much as they try. So it's up to us to then to say, well, how do we turn this from just virtue signaling token metrics to try and measure this stuff to actually show them why they should care? And a lot of that work needs to be show them why these teams perform better, show them the value that happens within the culture, show them why you will have less staff turnover. Like, you can use the hard and soft metrics, and you can't measure culture, you can't measure diversity, you can't measure engagement, you can't measure things like that in a spreadsheet. You actually have to go and walk the floor, particularly in larger organizations. So I just think it's about, rather than getting frustrated with people up the food chain that won't listen, recraft the message so they do care, and make them understand. And that's, like, once again, it's choose your heart.
I reckon there's some higher level people I've been talking to really do seem to care about this at the moment.
Yeah.
The older people are like, yes, we can be better. We need to be better. I understand this needs to be different and I'm ready to make change. Where we've hit some resistance has been kind of like the 30-year-old guys who were told, or maybe slightly younger. So they've been told, had this promise their whole life of, you do the right thing, these doors will open to you. This is your pathway. This is what's been crafted for you. And they're coming into a reality that's slightly different to that. And they're feeling like any positive discrimination or quotas is someone taking something from them. And there's some pushback from that space, which is interesting because, I mean, you can frame it however you want. My personal opinion on that is actually the floor's just been opened and it's a bit more equitable here. But they don't feel like that. They feel like they had something on offer and it was taken away. I don't know how to reframe.
I understand it. Like, you know, coming from that position, like, I don't know. I lost out to a pretty lucrative university place when I was 19, based on it was given to a woman of color. We had exactly the same. We had exactly the same grades. I had more extracurricular things in mind, but I had a better interview process, everything, and that was a very jarring experience at that age. Really got me thinking about kind of this equitable landscape, right? Rather than this extremism that can exist. And that's the big issue, right? You know, whatever you do when it comes to pushing down on one side, you're going to have a backlash on the other side, unless you can create a really inclusive environment where it is about creating equity. It's not about like tokenism or about virtue signaling. That's the real problem, right? So, and I think you were there. Like I ran an event last year, which was around about getting men as part of the conversation during IWD, and that was off the back of an event I think we both went to, where I was one of two guys in the room with 100 people, right? Now, for me, perfect, right? These events are really important. It's really important to activate and try to be doing things. But when there is like, you know, when you do start to create this conversation that people feel excluded from, taking us back to the inclusion piece, that's when you create this kind of almost, you know, conservative backlash of extremism the other way, which is really damaging to actually fixing the problem in the first place. It's really challenging to get all the voices included.
Yeah, I mean, if you go and disenfranchise a whole cohort by trying to drive positive change, you're just taking one problem and shifting it elsewhere. So it's about, once again, it's about education, and you know, and that comes back to leadership. When any resource comes in an organisation, it should be explained to them what it takes to move up in that organisation, what you need to do, and have a really clear and unambiguous and fair framework that says these are the things that need to happen, and not make it about who you go and have a coffee with or who you go and have a beer with or whatever it might be. I've probably benefited from that in the past, being my the way I look, and I'm not going to lie about that.
You're pretty, Reese. Is that what you said?
Not that. I think you know what I'm saying. But like, I want to make sure I'm part of the solution, not part of the problem. It's not my fault. I was born as a white male, but so try and, you know, and I know that I've still got unconscious biases, and I've got great people in my network like Gretchen that will slap me about if she sees that, and I'm really fortunate to have that, because I'm you know, about a growth mindset, and it's not, you know, but I just think it needs to be genuine what you're doing, and I think education and clarity is the way forward to not disclude anyone by including others.
Well, that's it. Like, I think, like, you know, again, you know, acknowledging the privilege that you have, but I have a real problem with, and I don't want to use the F word, not the F word. I have a real problem with this, like, almost exclusive version of that, which is this, this really toxic. I think it's toxic. This idea of the straight white male being this evil character that has perpetrated. You see it on TV. There's comedians making a living out of this, hating on this, and then people are surprised when there's people that don't buy, these 30-year-olds you're talking about, don't buy into this equitable narrative. And it's like, I'm sorry, but if you're being told that you're wrong because of the color of your skin, and like you say, Reese, we didn't choose to be born like this. Yes, we have privilege, but that's for me, that's what it comes back to, this equitable, inclusive environment to create for everyone, right? Everyone pulling toward the same mission, because otherwise you won't get that buy-in because you've alienated someone else.
It is just better together, right?
Yeah.
Like that. The whole point of this is so we can all work together and do the next thing. And I think
it's creating safe conversations where someone, if they feel like they're being discluded, regardless of their background, that they can say, hey, I'm frustrated. This is how I feel. I'm not saying it's right, but this is how I feel. Can we discuss without being, um, I hate the word cancelled, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Jacinda Ardern did a speech at one of the universities, like a conferral something. You can find it on YouTube, but she speaks very eloquently to how there's kind of extremism in just about everything at the moment. Yeah, like politics, diversity, all the things have been pushed to the extreme. And she goes, I think we need to come back to that space. The space in between is where we need to spend time now. And that requires you to come together and have a shared vision of what it can be in the future. So in my dream world, the reason we started Kaleida, the main motivator was that so the technology we're building, each technology is built by people representative of those consuming it. That would be the ideal dream, right? So if you think that through, that's not saying I want an engineering team that is 50% women, 50%. Like it's not doing that. It's saying represent your end user, whoever that may be. Let's do that.
I saw Cindy Gallop at South by Southwest talking about this. I don't know if you know Cindy, but she's founder of Make Love Not Porn, and she was talking about this. And it really actually hit me that, the internet as we know it was built by a bunch of 20-year-old white guys, ultimately, in San Francisco. And that's the world that we now exist on, So, like, where's that, like you say, where's that diversity in what the end user is? It's so exclusive in that. But the point you're just making, Gretchen, I'm going to go back a second. I think there's a real issue, and this is something I've been crazily all week has come up in every conversation I've had, which is this lack of diversity of opinion we have in society now, which, to Jacinda Ardern's point, is creating this extremism and this lack of inclusion in community, right? Because we almost now have to buy into this one opinion that is portrayed. Otherwise,
you don't belong there.
Yeah, we're outside the sphere of, acceptance in society. And I think it's really damaging that we're not able to have this diversity of opinion anymore and have healthy debate and have healthy argument on things.
You're in the wrong communities, my friend.
Yeah, this whole like if you're not with me, you're against me is crazy. It should be about just be curious. Okay, well that's really different to the way I think. Okay, I'm going to not get emotional about that. I'm going to say, oh, well, explain that to me because I'm challenged around these points, but just explain to me why you think like that. Or this whole thing, if you're going to try and demonize someone for their viewpoint, then you're never going to have a constructive conversation. How do we have safe conflict? How do we have safe conversations? Because there certainly are things that are absolutely taboo or abhorrent, and we all know what those things are. But outside of that, it should be an open conversation.
And how much do you learn, right, when you talk to someone who you go, oh, our values really exist on a different plane, and it's so easy to make them the bad guy, right? Or the villain in the story. But when you sit down and listen and go, tell me the background to that. Why do you think that? Well, explain that to me. Gosh, you learn stuff.
I feel like
often you learn that you were wrong.
We need to mandate critical thinking as like something you learn at school from a very young age. The acceptance of different perspectives and how you can grow from those. The ability to be able to argument and debate without taking offense and making it personal. I think these should be like core curriculum elements.
I love that. And also then the piece of going, that's okay. We can still be friends and or colleagues or associates and family. We don't have to agree on everything. That's fine.
Exactly. Gretchen, taking it back somewhat to the conversation around women leaving the tech industry, where are they going? So when all these different things that come into play, all these variables happen and they ultimately leave at a quicker rate than men do, where are you seeing the data that's suggesting they're moving to?
Anywhere. Like anywhere. They're literally going, I don't care, just make it stop, which is the horrifying piece. So some of them end up burnt out and don't work for another year. A lot of them, they'll do a wide range of things. Some are becoming teachers, which is unbelievably cool, right? You've got all these skills going into education. Some are running like anything. Some say, I'm going to do an admin role for the rest of my life. I'm done. I'm cooked. I don't want to interact with that group of people anymore. It's horrible, and it's hard to track because everything is really dispersed. There's not one specific direction they're going, but the signal is very clear that they are just getting out.
It's terrifying on a personal level, and it's terrifying for the economy. We've got the target of 1.2 million tech jobs by 2030, right? The Fed target. I think I read somewhere last week Startup Mustard did a report saying we're at 930 now, but with churn, we need to fill another 600,000, in
we're
the next.
educating at a much lower rate. I think at the same rate as we were in 1992.
Wow. And then you come into an industry which is still not serving everyone, right? It's still serving the minority or half of the country, should we say. You're going to have that churn. It's just going to increase more. And,
It's expensive. So one of our customers who uses Kaleida, literally the entire sales piece to them was around, they wanted to drive engagement and increase retention. And the reason people were leaving them was because they didn't have clear career growth plans. They didn't know where they were going. So they felt like they weren't getting promoted fast enough, or no one knew what that looked like. And they were talking about, I'd modeled what I thought the cost was for them. So on average, you can say it's about 120K to replace, a mid-level to a senior software engineer in Australia. And they were like, oh no, we cost that at about 250. And I was like, are you for real? What? Tell me about your maths here, people. Explain these numbers. And they said, your 120 is really valid. They said, but we exist in an industry with regulatory overlay and kind of 1.5 overlays. They said the time for an engineer to be really productive and writing code that's going to production and doing all these things and being a good leader and understanding the regulation is 18 months. So that's 18 months of paying a really good salary, because often technologists are they're quite expensive. They're a really, really powerful group of humans that will drive your company forward, and they're paid accordingly. And so they were saying that the time to value for them as an organization is 18 months at least.
Yeah. It's also making sure you're looking at the salaries you pay as an asset, not a liability.
Ooh, that's a deep one, Reese. We could spend a whole hour talking about that.
Just bring us back. Have we actually got to the 4 points yet? We were having a great conversation, of course. But
I think we're on 4. Number 4.
That was the 4. So it's lack of flexibility, unequal pay, lack of career progression, and perceived incompetence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Depressing. I mean, all fixable too, though, right? And the beautiful piece around this is yes, this helps women stay in the industry, but actually it helps all the people in the industry. It's that same piece around when you design for the margins, you capture the majority.
So where do founders, leaders, business owners, and minority groups who are wanting to get into the industry, where do they go to find mentorship, to be educated, to implement these changes, or get mentorship and coaching and those types of things? What do you see?
There's a whole heap of groups, and it depends who you are and where you sit in that structure, right? I think some organizations pay DEI consultants, and they do a lot of work with them and get coached and pay a lot of money. I've seen other people there's quite good community CTO groups in Australia. So they'll go there and they have varying quality in terms of, varying weight they put on DEI. So some of them would be like, don't worry about it. But most of them are like, we can help you. We've all had some speed bumps here. This is what we've learned. This is what we know. Or get in touch with this person and they can help. But of course, all the team at Kaleida are pretty passionate about this stuff. So if anyone wants to reach out to us via LinkedIn or our website, we know the stuff inside out and back to front.
And you're living it, Gretchen, right? You're living it every day. Ultimately, you it comes from a position of experience where you've built Kaleida. And I know we've talked offline a few times about some of the experiences you've had raising capital and those conversations. And I think, again, that's something that, that has a lot of systemic bias and there's a lot of issues in.
Yes, we've had some speed bumps raising capital. We've had questions that I haven't had when I was sitting in the room with male co-founders. One example, so our co-founding team is 3 women, all with technical backgrounds. And we did have one VC love our problem, love our solution, but they were really concerned that they couldn't invest yet because we didn't have a technical team, which is interesting. If you think through our pitches around, we've lived this problem, hence our solution, we know it lands in the market. And so we followed up with, we don't understand. What are you asking? We are the technical team. And they followed up with, no, but who writes the code? That would be the 3 of us, actually, my friend. And then they followed up with, yeah, but what about who does the architecture? Who's your CTO? Who does the thinking here? We're like, well, that would be Susan, and she's a freaking legend. And they were like, And so we went, it sounds a little bit like you're asking where the men are.
If you were, if you were to see like an example of that perceived incompetence at the extreme level, that has got to be it, right?
And
So
do you
you
want
could
the
probably see my
follow-up?
eye twitching then. I was like,
Yeah.
because obviously I know you, Gretchen, and I know on a work basis, I know Michelle even deeper than I know you. And it's like I'm absolutely astounded that you would get that question. That is just, I would have felt like I was on a like candid camera type thing.
Right.
I was waiting for them to laugh.
Yeah.
And you know what? We were, sometimes I'm not that gracious. So I'll say it. This time I was like, maybe they don't quite realize what they've said yet. I'm going to give them a moment to just backtrack and think that through. But then after I ended up saying, hey, sounds like you're looking for men, he said, well, your team's not really that diverse, is it? You're all women founders. Like, fair call. But I'm pretty sure you didn't call out the last 10 organisations you
Well,
talked
at a
to.
macro level, I would have just told you to, if you'd rung me at the time, I would have said, just get up and walk out. They're never going to invest.
Oh, do you know what we did?
Wrong, but, yeah.
Actually said,
And you don't want them.
you're not the person for us.
Yeah,
this is not going to go any further. This relationship
Exactly.
is done, which is fine and rational. And a quick no is really good when you're doing that, because as a founder, you've got no money and you've got no time. Right?
Yeah, fast no is way better than a drawn out yes when you're looking for investment.
But if you think it through at a deeper level, though, he just kind of said the quiet piece out loud. And there will be a whole heap of investors who think the way he does, and a whole heap of investment money that's actually not available to us. And we don't know why. I mean, it's a systemic bias, but credit to him. He just said it out loud, straight up, first time, and saved us a moment. But it does mean there's a whole piece closed off that's not accessible to us because of systemic bias. That hurts.
Yeah. And there's loads of VCs out there really, really championing. Sorry, I'm not even going to try and say that at the third time. Doing good things in this space. So I think, I'd always say to people, like, just focus on the ones doing the right things and work with them. And if they don't invest, they'll connect you with people that may, and just forget about those other ones, the laggards.
It does just make the pool of opportunity smaller for you. Like I 100%.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying
but
to.
the pool is a lot smaller.
Yeah,
the options.
Sorry, I'm absolutely not trying to diminish what you're saying, and it's not right. But like I tell my kids, focus on what you can control. And if you're in a room with people that are closed-minded idiots, then that's not your fault.
And it's really good to know. I mean, those are long-term relationships when you're fundraising. Right? These are the people you are going to be reporting to and spending a lot of time with. It's so important to know that they're the kind of people you want to spend time with.
Yeah.
Some of them are wobbly. That is all.
It's a nice way of putting it, Gretchen.
So, future plans, projects for Gretchen Incorporated?
Well, I may finish this fiber optic skirt at some point.
It's still going.
Still going. Well, there was a moment where, so it's with a Raspberry Pi, and then I need to do some soldering when I moved house and couldn't find my soldering iron. And then I found it, and it's looking a bit old, and like, oh, what if I burn everything with it? Actually, I'm just looking for excuses to not finish it. So the skirt will happen. There will be fiber optic cable, and there will be colors at some point in the next maybe 6 months.
Can I get a bit of like backfill on this skirt? What's the rationale behind it? Are we just trying to find something fun to wear at Christmas time?
Well, I was thinking I do a fair bit of emceeing, and sometimes I think we get so serious with technology, right? Like, imagine for a moment that we only use the English language to write legal documents. That would be a bit dumb, right? Like, it's a bit boring. Yeah. And we have this thing with tech, or particularly the spaces I've been in lately, where tech has to do business purposes. It has to be sensible and serious and do the stuff. And I wanted to flip that a bit and go, actually, no, tech can be fun and interesting and just quirky and doing some good stuff, weird stuff, fun stuff. So that's where the skirt came from, the skirt that was a ball gown that's now back to a skirt. There's some design engineering challenges in it. So for the fiber optic stuff to show up, it has to be quite a lightweight fabric. But to power it, I need a battery. It's like, where does the battery go? What are we doing here? So it's going into the waistband in case there's enough space to hide it there. It's a whole project.
All the trade secrets coming out now. I can't wait to see it in person, Gretch. And like,
Literally, it is just to have fun. Because
I'll
I think we
volunteer
get
myself
this-
to wear it as well at one point, for sure. What else is going on, Gretch, beyond the skirt?
Beyond the skirt, Kaleida's, we're having heaps of fun at work, building stuff, getting new customers on board, helping people drive their own careers and seeing the outcomes of that. I'm also running Women Who Code Melbourne, really cool community group. And that's, yes, the title is Women Who Code, but it is for anyone who cares about helping women succeed in their tech careers. So we have heaps of fun. We've got a meet up next week. We're talking about AI stuff. And the following month we're doing, and we haven't done this since before COVID, a hands-on like workshop programming. We're going to tinker with React and build some stuff and get it up live. We haven't done a workshop like that for so long. I'm seriously excited.
Awesome. How many people, Gretchen, do you get, women who turn up and say, I am interested, but I've had zero experience in this? How many people, are you going to get into the start of the pipeline almost?
It's probably about 10% of who turns up to our events will be, I'm just here to see if this is where I want to be, or if this is a place I can be, or if this is where I belong. Sometimes the other groups like Code Like a Girl, their community stuff lands a bit better with the earlier people. But I would say if you're talking to someone and they go, oh, I'm kind of interested in tech, maybe send them along to Women Who Code, because what have you got to lose? I mean, typically there's food and cool people. So worst case scenario, you get fed.
Potentially very bright skirts in the future.
Exactly.
Merch.
I'm hoping to wear that, as I also am on the Churchill Club committee, and we run a whole heap of events throughout the year. But the cornerstone one is the Top Tech Trends Debate, and it's sponsored by the Victorian government. And we get people up on stage to actually debate. Heaps of fun. And so they talk about what they think is going to happen in the future and what's a great trend, and kind of fight it out. So maybe the skirt will be done for that. That would be a good deadline.
Okay, we are coming up to time, Dickie. So I'm sure we will have Gretchen on again in the future. We could go for hours. Is there anything else you must ask her today before we wrap up?
Great. I'll just give us a one-line inspiration for the people out there that are listening and thinking, I want to be the change that Gretchen's talking about. Like, how do they get involved, and what's kind of what's the thing to be working on today that can help us create a better tomorrow?
Oh, that's a tough question for a one-liner. How much wordy could that carry on? But I think there's a whole piece around knowing every incremental piece of change makes a difference. You grow slowly until you grow fast all at once. I would say go out and do a good thing. Be a decent human. Listen to the underrepresented people, or just listen to someone different to you. And actually listen. Don't talk over them. Just listen.
I love it. Hopefully everyone listening to you today talking about that as well.
Yeah, please give me a one-liner to my 45-second question. So Gretchen, in terms of how do people get in contact with you, follow you, assuming LinkedIn?
I'm on LinkedIn, Gretchen Scott. There's a few of us actually. I have a photo of Lake Tekapo as my background. That would be me. Kaleida is also on LinkedIn, so it's Kaleida, like a kaleidoscope. And our website's kaleida.team.
Great. I will put those links in the show notes when we go up on Apple and Spotify. Any closing remarks, Vicky?
I just want to say thanks to Gretchen. Love the conversation. Gretchen, this is something I could talk about for hours and hours and hours, and I'm looking forward to doing that over a drink sometime soon. But thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Gretchen. It's been a pleasure having you, and I'm sure we'll have you again soon. So thank you, everyone. All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Growth Cartel, which was brought to you by Petona and 4Phase Consulting. Please support us by liking, subscribing, and sharing our content. Our next episode will be landing soon.